This video looks at lists, how we use lists with for loops, and also what a standard algorithm is in relation to that for Python. Okay, so as we've already seen, lists do move in a sequential fashion. Basically, they start from one point, from the 0, and then they would move to the next value, which is 1, and then they would move to the next value, which is 2, and keep going that way. For loops also operate in the same way. We can have them starting at 0, and then they move up to 1, and then 2, and then 3, and so on. So what we can do, which is quite useful, is we can use a list and we can use a for loop together, and we can get them to do different things for us. So what we can do is we can have a look at a set of algorithms that we would use to get a set result. So an algorithm is just like a recipe, pseudocodes for completing a set task. In programming, there are things that we do commonly again and again, like maybe counting the occurrence of something, or finding a maximum value, or finding a minimum value, and so on. So there are things that get done an awful lot. And to save people thinking about how they might actually do that in an algorithm, we have these standard algorithms, so they can be used in any programming language and just implemented in the syntax, the layout of the language itself. So the first one I'm going to have a look at is the count algorithm. So we'll look at the algorithm and then an example of it in Python. So to count something, so you get the required value that you want to count. You set the current occurrences of that value, the count, to 0. And then for every element in the array, the list, if this element matches required value, then we add 1 to the occurrences. So we add 1 to the count. So if it matches, we increment the count by 1. If it doesn't match, that's fine. There is no else. We just keep coming back up. We would move on to the next element in the array list. And then we check if this element matches the required value, then we add 1 to occurrences. If it doesn't, we just keep going round. So we go round and round and round, and effectively we count the number of occurrences that we have of a particular value. So we're ending the loop here, and we're printing out the occurrences, the count. So that's the standard algorithm for it. So you could use that algorithm in any programming language. What we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the implementation in Python. So here I have got name, date, and just an explanation as to what's going on. Up the top here, I have a list, and the list is called marks, and I've got a whole series of numbers inside there. So what I want to do, as you can see here, we're looking to count all the marks 50, below 50. Okay, so we set the count initially up to 0 because we have to have a starting point. We initialize it, we set it to 0 so that we know how many we're counting. And then I've got for x in range length of marks. So len marks will return a number. It'll return the number of entries inside here. So x will keep a count of how far along it has gone in this list. So we go into the first one. So x initially will take on the value of 0. So we have if marks x. Now you'll see I've had to cast it because at the moment it's in the list and there is no variable type. So I need to cast it because I'm going to use it with a number. So the value here is 20, So if 20 is less than 50, or 20 is less than 50, so we do the portion inside the if, so we have count equals count plus 1. So that would make count equal to 1. Come back up to the for loop. The for loop is incremented by 1. We move on to 76. And then we have if int 76, so we're making 76 an integer, a whole number. If 76 is less than 50, it's not. So we don't do the if portion here, and there is no else. So we come back up. It moves on to 47. Okay, so we have if 47 as an integer. So if 47 is less than 50, and it is, we come down and we add 1 to the count. Well, the count is currently 1, so we have 1 plus 1. The new value of the count would be 2. And what would happen is it would come back up and it would just move on to the next value. The next value is 67. Comes down to the if. We're having to cast it, remember, if 67 is less than 50, it's not. So we don't do anything, come back up. Go to the next value. If 52 is less than 50, it's not. So we do not do this part of the code. Come back up, and we're on our last entry here. So we have got if 80 is less than 50, it's not. So we come down here, we don't do anything, we come back up. We're at the end of our for loop, so we move down to the next line, which is line 17 here, and it says the number of marks below 50 is, and it should be 2. And if we look on the right hand side, you can see that that is the case. So this particular algorithm lets us count. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the max algorithm. So similar to the other algorithm I looked at, this is an algorithm that can be used in any programming language. So the first thing we do is we set the maximum to the first element. So the first thing on your list, that's what you set the maximum as, because we have to have a starting point. And then we loop for all the other elements in the array. And we look and we see if the current one that we're looking at in the array is greater than the maximum. We set the maximum to the one that we're looking at. And then we have end if. Now, if that is not the case, we don't do anything. We just keep going round and checking each of the different elements in the list. Once we've checked all of them, we're at the loop end and we just print out the maximum. So seeing this inside code. So again, it would start off the program the same way, author, date, what this is about. And again, I have got marks, and this time it's a different set of numbers. So we start off by setting the max equal to the first thing on the list. The first thing on the list is position 0. So we have got max equals int. Now I have to cast it because I'm going to use it in a comparison, so it has to be a number. So max equals int marks 0. So we've got our starting point. And then we have for x in range, and I'm starting off at position 1 because I've already got position 0 checked as the max. It's the current max, so we don't have to recheck it. And then we go for the rest of the elements in the array for the length of it. So if int marks x, so we're starting off at 762. So if 762 is greater than max, it is. Max equals 762. And then we'll come back up and we'll move to the next one. The next one is 987. So we're saying if 987 is greater than max, it is. So we set the new max equal to 987. We come back round and we move to the next element in the array, which is 4, 6, 7. Then we come down. If marks is greater, if 4, 6, 7 is greater than 987, it's not. So we don't do anything. Move on to the next one, which is 5, 2, 3. If 5, 2, 3 is greater than 987, it's not. So we move on to the next one. And the last one is 808. So we have if 808 is greater than 987, it's not. So we don't do anything. We come back up, we're at the end of our for loop. And then we just come down to line 20 and print out the maximum value is 987. The minimum algorithm is very similar. The only difference really is you check to see in comparison to the max, you check to see if it's lower instead of higher. So the first thing we do is we set the minimum to the first item in the list. We look for all other items in the list that we have. And if this current one that we're looking at is less than the minimum, we set the minimum to this current one we're looking at, and then we've got end if. So that will go through every element in this list. We've got the loop end, and then we would print out the minimum. So here we have it. We've got the date, what's going on here, and we've got the marks again. This time instead of the max, we are looking for the minimum mark. So I've got min equals int marks 0, because the first thing that we do is we set the very first thing in the list to the current minimum. Gives us a starting point. And then we have got for x in range 1 to the length of marks. Now we're doing it from position 1 because we've already got position 0 sorted. So we're doing it from position 1. Then we have if int marks, and what we have to do is we have to take the value from the list and cast it as an integer. The value at position 1 is 762. So if 762 is less than the current value, which is 200, it's not. So we ignore this next section, come back round. This time it's 987. So if 987 is less than 200, it's not. So we go to the next one. If 462, down here, if 462 is less than 200, it's not. So we go back round again, and we have 523. So if 523 is less than 200, it's not, so we don't do that. And we come to our last one, 808. So if 808 is less than 200, it's not. So by chance, the very first value we set is the correct value. So we come down, we come out of the for loop, we're finished, and we come out and we print out the minimum value is 200. And there we have it up there. Okay, another common thing that we might do is find an average of something. So we've got the max, we've got the min. We've found a specific value, and another thing we can do is we can find the average of something. So again, here's the standard algorithm that we've got. So for the standard algorithm, it can be used in any programming language. The implementation you guys will see is Python. So initially we set total equal to 0, because that's going to hold the addition of all of the elements in this list that we've got. So we look for all elements in the array, and we add their numbers to the total. And then that's us got the grand total of all the numbers added together. And then we set the average equal to the total divided by the length of the array, and then print out the average. So we'll see that in code here. Okay, so I have got marks again, and this time it's 20, 76, all the way up to 80. And I have set total equal to a float, and I've given it a start value of 0. So I've got for x in range length of marks. So for the length of this particular list, marks, I want to do whatever's inside the for loop. So the thing that's inside the for loop is total equals total plus marks x. Marks x starts at 0, so we have 20. So we have the new total would be equal to the old total, which is 0, plus marks x, which is 20. So the new total becomes 20. And then we go round, x becomes 1. So our new total would be equal to the old total, which is 20, plus 76. That would become 96, so our new total would be 96. And then we go round, and we have got the old total, which is 96, plus 47. And then the value for that is added inside total. And it keeps going round and round and round and round until it adds all of these numbers up together. And that would become the total. So that's all that's in the for loop. Once we've done that, we go down to the average. So the average is equal to the total that we've just calculated divided by the number of items in the list. So that would be length marks. And then we just print out the average mark is. Average happens to be 57. Okay, so that would be the code for getting the algorithm, for getting the average in Python. Okay, if you've got any questions, ask me in class. If there's anything you're unsure of, just give me a buzz. Try all of these programs, and also make sure you do the exercises on Canvas.